if I told you that in certain climates, you could water perfectly, weed perfectly, just meticulously tend a plot of land for months and then harvest exactly zero cabbages?
Right. I mean, it sounds like a riddle, but it's actually a perfect illustration of, the invisible mechanics happening right beneath our feet.
It really is. And we are definitely going to get into the exact biology of how that zero cabbage mystery
Oh,
happens.
absolutely. It's a fascinating biological quirk.
Sure. But first, I want you listening to just think about the last time you scraped half a plate of dinner into the trash. Because globally, we are losing or wasting nearly one-third of all the food we produce.
Yeah, one-third. It's staggering.
It is. That's roughly 1.3 billion tons of food worldwide every single year.
And, the scale of that is almost hard to comprehend. The ripple effects are just massive.
Yeah.
It's not just an economic loss, though. I mean, the financial hit is wild.
Right, because it's also about what happens after it goes in the trash.
Exactly. When that food just sits in landfills, it generates enormous amounts of greenhouse gases, it leaches pollutants, and it represents this massive, inefficient drain on our natural resources.
Yeah, and to put a localized number on it, if we look at India alone, they are dealing with about 67 million tons of food waste, which translates to a mind-blowing $14 billion in economic losses.
Right. And you have to look at that waste not just as a problem, but as misplaced potential,
Misplaced potential, I like that.
Because converting that specific environmental liability into a resource, well, it might be one of the most elegant solutions we have for the future of sustainable farming.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring how we can take that rotting landfill overflow and turn it into a literal gold mine for organic agriculture.
Yeah, turning a huge negative into a huge positive.
We're grounding this in a peer-reviewed research article from 2020. It's from the International Journal of Recycling of Organic Waste in Agriculture. And the title is Compost from the Food Waste for Organic Production of Cabbage, Cauliflower, and Radish Under Subtropical Conditions. Okay, let's unpack this.
So this research really hits on two massive kind of colliding trends. On one side, like you mentioned, we have this overflowing crisis of food waste.
Right.
And on the other side, organic agriculture is becoming incredibly important worldwide. Consumers are, they're demanding safer, healthier, environmentally friendly food.
But the farmers are kind of caught in the middle, aren't they?
Exactly. They desperately need alternative ways to improve soil fertility, but without relying heavily on synthetic fertilizers.
Let's talk about those synthetic fertilizers for a second, because
Yeah.
the default assumption for decades has been, well, the soil is low on nutrients, so just dump a bag of chemical nitrogen on it and call it a day.
Yeah, the quick fix.
Why are farmers globally trying to move away from that? Like, what's the actual harm?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, synthetic fertilizers are essentially like giving a plant an intravenous sugar drip.
Okay, a sugar drip.
Right, you get this massive immediate spike in growth. But over time, those chemicals can bypass and even damage the soil microbiome.
Oh, wow. So it actually hurts the living part of the dirt.
Yeah, and when you stop feeding the microbes in the dirt, the physical structure of the soil begins to collapse. It becomes compacted, it loses its ability to hold water, and eventually it degrades to the point where it requires more and more synthetic chemicals just to yield the exact same amount of crops.
It's like a leaky bucket in our global economy. You're just pouring resources into a system that's fundamentally broken.
That is a great analogy. It's a total agricultural treadmill.
But compost does the opposite, right?
Precisely. Compost enriches the soil organic matter. It fundamentally improves the physical structure of the earth, enhances microbial activity, and conserves moisture, all while acting as a slow-release supply of essential nutrients.
Okay, so I get that organic farming is the goal, but I want to look at the specific context of this study. This took place in a subtropical environment, specifically at Arni University in Himachal Pradesh, India.
Right, a very specific, challenging climate.
Yeah, because subtropical climates aren't exactly a walk in the park for farming. You're dealing with extreme heat, unpredictable monsoons, and soils that often suffer from severe nutrient leaching. Can throwing our dinner scraps into a pile really solve a problem that complex?
It's a fair question. Those are incredibly stressful conditions for any crop. In a subtropical climate, the heat can literally bake the moisture right out of the ground.
And then the rain washes everything else away.
Exactly. Heavy, moderate rainfall can wash whatever topsoil fertility you have right out of the root zone. So declining soil fertility is a massive pressure point there.
So, the central objective for these researchers was to figure out if compost derived entirely from food waste could hold up under those brutal conditions.
Yes, and it's crucial to point out that this was a real field condition experiment.
Right. I want to emphasize that to everyone listening. This wasn't conducted in some sterile, perfectly climate controlled artificial greenhouse.
No, they did this out in the elements,
Yeah.
growing three economically crucial crops: cabbage, cauliflower, and radish.
Which makes it so much more applicable for real farmers.
Absolutely. If a farming technique is going to be adopted in the real world, you have to prove it works against real-world variables. Unpredictable weather, natural pests, shifting temperatures.
Let's get into the actual recipe they used, because this is where I have to push back a little on the practicality.
Okay, let's hear it.
The researchers collected daily food waste from the university's boys and girls hostels, basically cafeteria scraps.
Right.
And then they blended the raw food waste in a 1-to-1 ratio with pulverized soil to compost it.
Yes, a 1-to-1 ratio.
Wait, if they're just dumping raw cafeteria waste into a pit, wouldn't that instantly attract a massive rat problem? And also, if a huge hospital or a corporate campus wants to do this, where are they getting tons of pulverized dirt to mix with it every day? Doesn't that make it incredibly expensive?
That is a very valid concern if you assume they're buying premium topsoil or expensive agricultural bulking agents. But they aren't.
Oh, I'm not buying it.
No. The brilliance of this method is that you use the native degraded soil from the site itself. You don't buy anything.
Oh, wow. So you're just scraping up the poor quality dirt you're trying to fix anyway.
Exactly. Mixing the food scraps with the local soil does two things immediately. First, it physically masks the odors, which solves the massive pest problem you mentioned. No one wants a rat infestation on a university campus.
Right, definitely not.
And second, that local dirt is already inoculated with native microbes. So by mixing it in, you jumpstart the biological breakdown naturally.
So they just mix it, put it in composting pits, turn it periodically, and let it naturally decompose for 2 months until it becomes stable, mature compost.
Yeah. No multi-million-dollar processing plants, just a shovel, a pit, and some time.
That's amazing. It proves that even institutional food waste doesn't need high-tech interventions to become nutrient-rich organic manure.
Exactly.
Okay, so the researchers have their mature compost. They dried it on a cement pad and applied it at 10 tons per hectare. They set up their treatment plots and then control plots right next to them with zero compost.
Right. Maintaining both under identical agronomic conditions, same water, same weeding.
So that any differences observed could be confidently attributed directly to that hostile food waste.
Precisely.
So before we look at the vegetables, let's look at the foundation. Did this simple cafeteria waste actually change the chemistry of the earth?
The before and after data on the soil parameters is pretty remarkable.
It's staggering. Let's look at soil organic matter, or SOM. In the control plot, the SOM was around 24.64%. But in the treatment plot, it skyrocketed to 97.16%.
Yeah, it nearly quadrupled. And to understand why that matters, you have to look at the mechanics of what organic matter actually does in the dirt.
Because it's not just dead stuff sitting there.
No, not at all. When you have that much organic material, it acts as an all-you-can-eat buffet for beneficial microbes.
And as those microbes eat, they literally change the physical architecture of the soil, right?
They do. As microbes digest the organic matter, they excrete these sticky biological glues, substances like glomalin.
Glomalin sounds like a medicine.
It kind of acts like one for the soil. Those glues bind microscopic dirt particles together into larger aggregates. It physically transforms the soil from a dense, compacted block into a porous breathing structure filled with microscopic pockets.
Which perfectly explains the next massive jump in the data. Water holding capacity, or WHC, it went from 19.84% in the control plot to 29.54% in the treated plot.
Right, almost a 10% absolute increase.
I always used to think of water holding capacity like a sponge, but in a subtropical environment with heavy rainfall, it's more like a bank vault for nutrients, isn't it?
That is a fantastic way to look at it.
Because without that vault, if a monsoon hits, the water just acts like a bank robber. It washes all the essential minerals straight down past the root zone where the plants can't even reach it.
Exactly. The higher water holding capacity physically prevents that fast leaching. And because the soil is holding on to the water, it's also holding on to the electrical conductivity, or EC.
Electroconductivity in dirt.
Yeah, it essentially measures the concentration of dissolved salts and minerals available in the soil water. Higher EC within a healthy range means more plant food is swimming around in that vault, ready to be absorbed.
And that includes all those macro and micronutrients, right? Like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, iron, manganese, copper, and zinc.
Yes, massive increases across the board for all of those.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the researchers didn't just look at a few numbers and call it a day.
No, they were incredibly thorough.
Yeah, they threw a massive arsenal of statistical analysis at this dirt. Students' test tests, one-way ANOVAs, two-way ANOVAs, regression analyses, and something called principal component analysis, or PCA.
The heavy hitters of statistics.
Right. Now, for someone who isn't a statistician, that sounds like corporate accounting jargon. How does PCA actually prove the compost was the hero here? Why go to those lengths?
What's fascinating here is that agricultural science is inherently chaotic. You have dozens of variables changing simultaneously. pH, moisture, temperature, macronutrients, micronutrients.
Boy, so if a plant grows bigger, how do you know definitively which of those dozens of factors actually caused it?
Exactly. You can't just guess that it was the nitrogen. So you use an ANOVA's analysis of variance to rigorously prove that the differences between your treatment and control groups aren't just random flukes of nature.
Okay, so the ANOVAs prove the change is real.
Yes. And then you use regression analysis to track how those interactions change over time as the plant grows.
But what about the principal component analysis? Because they highlight the PCA specifically as the key to understanding this.
Right. PCA is a powerful statistical tool that sifts through all that chaotic biological noise to find what truly matters. It mathematically groups variables together to show you which factors are actually pulling the strings.
It's sort of like a detective finding the ringleader in a crowded room.
That's exactly it. And the PCA in this study proved definitively that the pH, the electrical conductivity, and the water holding capacity were the primary factors driving the release of minerals into the soil.
So the math proves the dirt is fundamentally richer, the bank vault is full of nutrients, and the soil is breathing.
Yes, the PCA verified it beyond a doubt.
But rich dirt doesn't feed people. Did this actually translate into vegetables surviving this harsh subtropical environment?
It absolutely did. And the physiological performance of the plants tells an incredible story of stress resilience.
Let's talk about that stress. Because over the 107-day growing period, the researchers meticulously tracked plant height, leaf width, and a metric called leaf relative water content.
A crucial metric for drought and heat tolerance.
Right. And in the treated cabbage, it was 11.77% versus just 4.08% in the control group.
They were significantly more hydrated.
But they also measured something called electrolyte leakage. I have to admit, when I read electrolyte leakage, my mind immediately goes to, like, a leaky car battery. What is happening on a cellular level in these plants?
It's actually a very similar concept to a battery leaking. Plant cells have membranes that keep all their internal fluids and ions, their electrolytes, safely contained.
Okay.
But when a plant is subjected to severe environmental stress, like a subtropical heat wave or a drought, those cell walls can become damaged and brittle.
So they literally start leaking their internal fluids out into the surrounding tissue.
Yes. High electrolyte leakage means the plant's cellular structure is breaking down. It's actively struggling to survive.
But what did they find with the compost?
What the researchers found was that the plants grown in the food waste compost showed significantly decreased electrolyte leakage. They experienced far less stress.
Is that because the compost provided the nutrients required to build stronger, thicker cell walls?
Partially that, yes. And partially because the improved water holding capacity of the soil acted as a constant hydration buffer. It physically protected the plants from the physiological stress of the heat.
That makes total sense. They also track the ash content of the plants, which I found fascinating.
Oh, the ash content is a great indicator.
Yeah, I always assumed ash was just, what was left over after a campfire. But they use it to prove that the plants were actually taking up those minerals from the soil.
Right. Because when you combust plant tissue in a laboratory setting, the carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen all burn away as gases.
So what's left over?
What is left behind the ash is the solid, non-combustible inorganic minerals: calcium, potassium, iron, zinc.
Oh, wow. So a higher ash content in the compost-treated plants physically proves that those roots were successfully drinking up the mineral buffet that the compost unlocked.
Precisely. It proves the nutrient transfer was successful.
Which brings us to the ultimate bottom line. The harvest. We can talk about statistics and cell walls all day, but farmers need yields. And the numbers here are life-changing.
They really are.
Radish yields increased by 278%, going from 7.30 tons per hectare in the control plot to 20.33 tons in the compost plot.
Incredible job.
And cauliflower increased by 220%, jumping from 10.16 tons to 22.36 tons per hectare.
Those are margins that can completely transform a farming community's economic stability.
But then we get to the cabbage, and this is the hook I mentioned at the very beginning of our deep dive.
Yes, the zero cabbage mister.
Right. The data states that the control plot yielded 0.0 tons of cabbage, while the compost plot yielded over 37 tons per hectare.
Quite the contrast.
Hold on, how does a control plot yield literally zero? Did they just forget to water it? Did goats eat it? Seriously, how do you get zero?
It is the most striking finding in the paper, and it comes down to a harsh biological necessity. Remember, the researchers maintained both plots identically regarding watering and agronomy. The control plot wasn't abandoned.
So it was watered perfectly, tended to perfectly, but it still produced zero cabbage.
Yes, and here's the mechanism behind it. A cabbage plant is a survivor. It will grow broad, green leaves under mediocre conditions just to capture sunlight.
Right.
But the actual formation of the cabbage head, the dense fruiting body that we actually harvest and eat, that requires a very specific physiological trigger.
Like a biological switch.
Exactly. And flipping that switch requires high levels of very specific micronutrients. While macronutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus fuel the leaf growth, the cabbage specifically requires trace elements like zinc and copper to trigger head formation.
Oh, and if we look back at the statistical math, the principal component analysis proved that the control soil was severely deficient in those exact micronutrients.
Precisely. Because the native soil lacked those trace minerals, the cabbages in the control plot grew outward, they grew leaves, but they entirely failed to form heads. The fuel to flip the biological switch just wasn't there.
Wow, but the compost plot had it.
Right. The food waste compost provided a diverse nutritional cocktail. It provided the exact zinc and copper required for the cabbage to fruit, taking the yield from a literal 0 to over 37 tons per hectare.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize this entire journey, the takeaway for you listening is incredibly profound. Food waste is not just garbage taking up landfill space.
Not at all.
It is a vital, cheap, and highly effective agricultural resource. By doing something as remarkably simple as mixing cafeteria scraps with degraded local soil in a pit, we can fundamentally rebuild the architecture of the earth.
It's that simple, yet that impactful.
We can stop the release of landfill greenhouse gases, create bank vaults for water in our soil, and achieve massive crop yields even in deeply challenging subtropical climates.
I think the true beauty of this study is the juxtaposition of its simplicity and its rigor. You have highly advanced statistical validation statistics, PCAs, ANOVAs, cellular electrolyte leakage tracking, all being used to validate a method so accessible that any farmer could replicate it.
Yeah, any institution, any community, anywhere in the world could start doing this tomorrow without buying a single piece of heavy machinery.
Exactly. It's incredibly empowering science.
And that leads to a final provocative thought I want you to mull over today. Building on this study, if a single university's hostel waste can generate a 278% increase in radish yields and literally bring cabbage production from 0 to 37 tons per hectare just by mixing it with native dirt, imagine the agricultural revolution if every large institution did this.
It would change everything.
Imagine if every public school, every hospital, every sprawling corporate campus created a closed-loop compost system with their local farmers. What would our global food systems look like if we stopped treating waste as the end of the line and started treating it as the critical first ingredient of tomorrow?